The jungle where modern doctrine was forged. January 23, 1968. Near the village of Khe Sanh, Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. The rain has already soaked everything that can be soaked. Jungle canopy drips steadily onto steel helmets and M16 handguards, each drop sounding louder than it should in the early morning dark. Captain Charles Beckwith crouches beside a shallow depression scraped into red clay, watching mist slide between tree trunks like slow-moving smoke. The air smells of wet earth, cordite residue, and rotting vegetation. Somewhere ahead, maybe 200 meters, a North Vietnamese army patrol is moving downslope. No one speaks. No one needs to. Beckwith checks his watch by touch, not sight. His men do the same, hands moving with practiced economy. These soldiers are not line infantry. They are a provisional long-range reconnaissance patrol, drawn from volunteers, trained hard and fast, operating beyond artillery range and without immediate support. Their mission is simple in wording and brutal in execution. Observe. Confirm. Do not engage unless survival demands it. A young sergeant named Jim Morris shifts his weight slightly, easing pressure off his knee without snapping a twig. He was trained to move like this at Nha Trang, where American advisors studied guerrilla tactics not from manuals but from enemy bodies pulled out of the jungle. Vietnam has taught them something older than doctrine. The jungle rewards patience and punishes speed. This moment is where modern special forces thinking begins. Not in a classroom, not on a firing range, but here. Wet, exhausted, isolated, and listening for an enemy who blends into terrain as easily as shadow. Beckwith learned this lesson years earlier while embedded with the British Special Air Service in Malaya. Now in Vietnam, he sees it proven daily. Large formations draw ambush. Heavy footprints invite contact. Control belongs to the unit that sees first and chooses when to disappear. The patrol lets the enemy pass. Later that night, back at a fire support base hacked from hilltop jungle, Beckwith sketches a crude map by red lens flashlight. Enemy movement patterns. Trail intersections. Timing. This intelligence will not win headlines, but it will shape airstrikes, artillery fire, and larger maneuvers days later. Vietnam is teaching American forces that information, not firepower, is the first decisive weapon. Across the country, similar lessons are being paid for in blood. In the Mekong Delta, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Melvin Spence rides low in a fiberglass patrol boat as brown water slaps the hull. His men wear black fatigues and grease on their faces, not to look intimidating, but to break up reflected moonlight. They are hunting Viet Cong tax collectors along canal networks no map properly shows. The boat engine cuts. Paddles dip silently. A village emerges ahead, lights flickering through palm fronds. Spence signals with 2 fingers. Split teams. No radio chatter. Hand signals only. This is another lesson Vietnam writes into the future of special operations. Units must operate decentralized. Junior leaders must decide and act without permission. There is no time to call higher headquarters when a firefight erupts at 10 meters. When contact happens, it is sudden and violent. A single shot. A shouted warning. Then controlled chaos. The SEALs disengage as quickly as they struck, melting back into the waterways before reinforcements arrive. They do not hold ground. They shape behavior. After weeks of this, enemy movement slows. Routes change. Fear spreads faster than propaganda. In the Central Highlands, civilian irregular defense group camps tell a different part of the story. Green Berets like Sergeant First Class Roy Benavides train Montagnard fighters to defend their villages. The Americans do not issue long speeches. They demonstrate how to set an ambush, how to read spoor, how to disappear after firing. Benavides learns that cultural understanding is not optional. Villagers fight harder when respected. They listen longer when treated as partners. Modern special forces will later call this foreign internal defense. In Vietnam, it is survival. By 1968, patterns are emerging across the war. Small units outperform large ones in complex terrain. Intelligence gathered by men on foot matters more than reports from headquarters. Initiative at the lowest level saves lives. Technology helps, but discipline and judgment decide outcomes. As Beckwith folds his map and seals it in a waterproof pouch, he does not yet know that these lessons will follow him long after Vietnam. They will shape the creation of Delta Force. They will influence special operations training pipelines. They will define how future wars are fought in deserts, mountains, and cities far from this jungle. For now, the rain keeps falling. The jungle keeps listening. And the men who learn fastest are the ones who live long enough to pass the knowledge on. Small units, big consequences. February 2, 1968. Hue City, Tuo Tiem Province. The smell here is different. Burnt masonry, sewage, smoke, and bodies left too long in the open. The ancient citadel walls loom over shattered streets as Sergeant First Class Gordon Rothman presses his back against a doorway, carbine held tight to his chest. The Tet Offensive has turned Vietnam upside down, and in Hue, the war has become intimate. Alley to alley. Room to room. This is not jungle warfare. This is something new. And again, the men closest to the problem are the ones forced to adapt first. Rothman leads a small marine advisory element attached to South Vietnamese troops. Radios crackle with fragmented reports. Maps are useless. Streets that existed yesterday are now piles of rubble. Enemy fighters move through tunnels, walls, and civilian crowds. Large unit maneuver collapses under its own weight. Control fractures. So squads begin acting independently. Fire teams clear buildings without waiting for orders. Junior leaders decide routes, fields of fire, and withdrawal points on instinct and experience. Suppression is short and precise. Ammunition is conserved. Grenades are counted carefully. The city punishes waste. Here, modern close-quarters battle doctrine begins to take shape. Not formally. Not yet. But in the way Marines and advisors learn to slice pie around doorways, cover angles, and coordinate movement with nothing more than eye contact and hand pressure on a shoulder. The lesson is brutal but clear. Special operations cannot rely on mass. They rely on initiative, adaptability, and trust between men who may be separated by walls instead of terrain. South of Hue, long-range reconnaissance teams are pushing even deeper beyond friendly lines. A 6-man patrol from the 101st Airborne moves through elephant grass taller than a man. Each step is measured. Each halt deliberate. Their radio antenna barely clears the foliage, and transmission windows are kept short to avoid direction finding. They are here to answer a single question. Where is the enemy moving next? When they spot a camouflaged supply cache hidden beneath banana leaves, they do not attack. They photograph it. Mark grid coordinates. Then disappear. Hours later, airstrikes erase the position. The patrol never fires a shot. This reinforces a core principle that modern special forces still teach. Detection without compromise is victory. Survival is success. Meanwhile, in the Mekong Delta, SEAL teams refine night operations. They learn that darkness belongs to those trained to use it. They adjust patrol timings, approach angles, and exfiltration routes constantly. Predictability is death. Repetition invites ambush. Lieutenant Spence drills his men relentlessly on immediate action. What happens when the boat takes fire from 10 meters? What happens when a teammate goes down in waist-deep water? What happens when civilians are between you and the enemy? Rules of engagement are not abstract concepts here. They are split-second decisions with strategic consequences. Kill the wrong person, and an entire village closes to you. Show restraint, and information starts to flow. Green Berets in remote camps learn this lesson even harder. A team that fails to respect local dynamics finds itself isolated overnight. A team that listens gains early warning, supply routes, and manpower no technology can replace. By late 1968, these patterns converge into something unmistakable. Vietnam has exposed the limits of conventional doctrine against irregular forces. It has elevated reconnaissance, intelligence fusion, cultural understanding, and decentralized command from supporting roles to primary weapons. Men like Beckwith, Benavides, and countless unnamed patrol leaders absorb these lessons not as theory but as muscle memory. They see what works. They remember what gets men killed. And when the war eventually ends, these experiences do not disappear. They are carried home, written into training programs, whispered in after-action reviews, and embedded into units that will one day operate far from Southeast Asia. The jungle, the city, and the delta have become classrooms. And the students are already preparing for wars they do not yet know they will fight. Intelligence, trust, and the birth of precision warfare. May 14, 1969. A forward operating base near the Cambodian border. The heat is oppressive even before sunrise. Sweat runs into eyes as Captain Charles Beckwith stands over a sand table, boots sinking slightly into packed earth. Around him, a small group of officers and senior NCOs listen in silence. This briefing will not involve battalions or sweeping arrows. It is about 6 men. Possibly 8. A recon team has confirmed an enemy command element moving through a border sanctuary. Political restrictions mean no large force can cross openly. So the mission will be surgical. Insert quietly. Observe. Call strikes only if confirmation is absolute. This is the evolution of a lesson Vietnam has hammered home. Precision beats presence. Beckwith emphasizes it again. Trust your patrol. Trust their judgment. If they abort, they abort. No questions. A compromised team is not a failure. It is a warning. Hours later, the team inserts by helicopter, rotors flaring briefly above triple canopy jungle. The aircraft never fully lands. Men drop, roll, and vanish before the sound fades. No air assault. No lingering signature. On the ground, Sergeant Morris leads point. He reads broken leaves and bent grass like text. A cigarette butt means local militia. Boot tread means regulars. He signals halt with a clenched fist. The team freezes. Through binoculars, they see it. Antennas. Field telephones. A guarded trail intersection. This is not rumor. This is confirmation. The radio transmission lasts seconds. Coordinates. Description. Strength estimate. Then silence. 2 hours later, airstrikes tear the jungle apart. The recon team is already moving away. No one will know their names. The strike will be credited to air power. But the decision was made by men on foot, alone, and trusted to be right. This relationship between special operators and supporting fires becomes foundational. Modern special forces still operate this way. Sensors and satellites assist, but confirmation often comes from someone physically present, close enough to smell cooking fires. Elsewhere, the war continues to refine human intelligence. In villages where Green Berets have earned trust, informants provide warnings days in advance. Not because they are paid well, but because relationships were built patiently. Sergeant First Class Roy Benavides understands this deeply. He eats what the villagers eat. He learns names. He listens more than he speaks. When an enemy force approaches his camp in 1968, it is local fighters who alert him first. Lives are saved before the first shot. Modern Special Forces doctrine will later formalize this as population-centric operations. In Vietnam, it is instinct. At the same time, intelligence failures leave scars. In areas where units rotate too quickly, relationships die with them. New faces mean old trust evaporates. Enemy influence fills the gap. Vietnam teaches that continuity matters as much as capability. By 1969, specialized units begin compiling lessons learned. Not glossy manuals. Handwritten notes. Marginalia in field guides. Instructors at training centers quietly adjust curriculums. More emphasis on land navigation. More on observation. Less on parade ground perfection. Night training increases. Language training expands. Psychological preparation becomes as important as marksmanship. The war has proven that the best operators are thinkers first, shooters second. The final realization is perhaps the most important. Special operations are not about heroics. They are about restraint. About knowing when not to pull the trigger. About shaping the battlefield invisibly. As Beckwith watches smoke rise on the horizon from a successful strike, he is already thinking ahead. Vietnam will end. The need for men who can operate quietly, precisely, and independently will not. The war is teaching its final lesson. The future belongs to those who can see without being seen. From Vietnam to the blueprint of modern special operations. October 12, 1970. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Cold air replaces jungle humidity, but the lessons come with the men who returned. Captain Charles Beckwith stands on a gravel range as students jog past, rifles slung, breath visible in the morning light. Vietnam is technically over for him. Operationally, it never ended. What Beckwith and others bring home is not a victory narrative. It is a correction. They redesign training around what Vietnam exposed. Selection becomes harder, not physically, but mentally. Candidates are isolated, deprived of sleep, pushed to make decisions with incomplete information. This mirrors the jungle, the city, the delta. You are alone. You are responsible. The core lesson from Vietnam now becomes doctrine. Small units win wars indirectly. They do not seize territory. They shape environments. Delta Force is born from this thinking. Its structure mirrors the long-range reconnaissance teams and advisory elements of Vietnam. Small assault elements. Mission command. Absolute trust in operators on the ground. No micromanagement from above. Meanwhile, Navy SEAL training incorporates riverine lessons learned in the Mekong. Instructors emphasize stealth insertion, rapid disengagement, and adaptability to civilian-dense environments. Boat handling becomes instinctive. Night vision becomes standard. What once required moonlight and grease paint now evolves into technology guided by Vietnam-era necessity. The Green Berets institutionalize foreign internal defense. Vietnam proved that training and advising local forces is not a secondary mission. It is often the main effort. Language skills are expanded. Cultural immersion is no longer optional. The goal is influence, not occupation. Urban combat lessons from Hugh find their way into close-quarters battle doctrine. Clearing techniques are refined. Communication inside small teams becomes standardized. Every movement is intentional. Every angle covered. The chaos of Hugh becomes a training scenario instead of a battlefield surprise. Perhaps the most lasting impact is how intelligence is treated. Vietnam taught that raw data is meaningless without context. Today's fusion cells mirror the recon patrols of Vietnam. Sensors collect. Humans confirm. Operators decide. Commanders learn to step back. Authority is pushed downward. The man closest to the target has the clearest picture. This principle defines modern special operations more than any piece of equipment. Failures are studied too. Over-reliance on technology. Poor continuity with local populations. Rotational churn that erodes trust. Vietnam becomes a cautionary tale as much as a template. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, these lessons spread beyond the United States. Allied Special Forces exchange instructors. Joint exercises reflect Vietnam-born concepts. Interoperability matters. Shared doctrine saves lives. What began as improvisation under fire becomes deliberate design. The jungle taught patience. The city taught precision. The delta taught adaptability. Together, they form the blueprint. As Beckwith watches another class finish a grueling land navigation exercise, he knows the lesson is incomplete. Doctrine is only as good as the next war allows it to be. Vietnam did not end special operations thinking. It began it. Why Vietnam still shapes special forces today. March 18, 2002. The Shah-i-Kot Valley, eastern Afghanistan. Snow crunches under boots as a small special operations team moves along a ridgeline at altitude. The air is thin, every breath measured. Night vision turns the world green and grainy. Somewhere below, enemy fighters are digging in, unaware they have already been mapped, observed, and understood. The men here carry technology unimaginable in Vietnam. satellite radios, precision-guided munitions, real-time intelligence feeds. Yet the way they move would be instantly familiar to Captain Beckwith, to Roy Benavides, to the recon patrols who learned the jungle the hard way. They move slowly. They observe longer than they shoot. They trust the man on point. When the call for fires comes, it is deliberate. Coordinates confirmed visually. Collateral considerations weighed. This is Vietnam's legacy carried into a new century. Precision is not about accuracy alone. It is about judgment. Modern special forces still organize around small teams because Vietnam proved that adaptability beats mass. They still invest heavily in language and cultural training because Vietnam showed that legitimacy shapes outcomes more than firepower. They still emphasize decentralized command because Vietnam punished hesitation and rewarded initiative. Even failures echo forward. Commanders remain wary of becoming disconnected from ground truth. Technology is powerful, but Vietnam taught that it can lie without human context. A man on the ground remains the final censor. Training pipelines reflect this lineage. Stress inoculation. Ambiguous scenarios. Ethical decision-making under pressure. These are not academic exercises. They are designed to recreate the uncertainty first faced in jungles and alleyways decades earlier. Special forces today operate globally, but the questions they ask are unchanged. Who controls information? Who understands the population? Who can act without being seen? Vietnam answered those questions at enormous cost. As dawn breaks over the Afghan mountains, the team exfiltrates quietly. The enemy never knew how close they came. The mission will not make headlines. That is by design. The war in Vietnam did not produce a single doctrine or manual that explains modern special operations. It produced something more durable. A mindset. One that values restraint over aggression. Understanding over force. Trust over control. Those lessons were written in rain-soaked jungles, shattered cities, and silent waterways. They are still read today by men and women who operate in the margins of war. Vietnam never stopped teaching. Special forces never stopped listening.